All right, good afternoon, everybody. The
Good
May 9th,
afternoon.
the May 9th, 2025 special called meeting of the Texas State Veterans Cemetery Committee meeting will come to order. Time is 1:30. Pursuant to section 31.015 of the Texas Natural Resources Code, I'm chairing this meeting in the commissioner's absence as the chief clerk of the General Land Office, as the commissioner is away on state business. Should the commissioner return prior to the conclusion of this meeting, I will relinquish the chair to her. The meeting of the Texas State Veterans Cemetery Committee is being held in person at 1700 North Congress Avenue, Stephen F. Austin Building, in room 940A, and by video conference call, in accordance with Texas Government Code Chapter 551, Texas Open Meetings Act. Access to the meeting by members of the public was published in advance in the Texas Register in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act. Access to the meeting by members of the public was published in advance. Oops, I'm reading. Any member of the public wishing to address the committee on a matter within its authority must do so at this location during the citizen communication period. The committee secretary will please call the roll.
Chief Clerk Jones.
Here.
Chair Corner.
Here.
Ms. Myers.
Here.
Mr. Scott.
Here.
Mr. Rothfelder.
Here.
Mr. Barber.
Present.
The quorum is present, and at this time, if you are able, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States and Texas flags. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic
For which is
one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee,
Pledge allegiance to
one state, under God, one and indivisible.
one and indivisible.
Thank you. I'm now going to call item 2 on the agenda, approval of the minutes from the special call committee meeting of June 25th, 2024. Are there any objections to approving the minutes from the June 25th, 2024 meeting by unanimous consent?
No objections.
No.
No objection. The minutes are approved. Next on the agenda is item number 3, citizen communication. Members of the public may address the Texas State Veterans Cemetery Committee concerning any matter within the authority of the committee. As chairwoman, I'm limiting the length of time available to each speaker to 2 minutes. The committee secretary shall keep track of time. Do we have anyone in attendance who wishes to address the committee? The next item on the agenda is item number 4, chair and committee member opening comments. Members, do you have any opening comments you would like to make?
No.
My only one is I appreciate being able to do this virtually rather than having to drive into Austin to meet in person. So thank you.
Welcome, especially on a Friday.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, the next item on the agenda is item number 5, consideration and possible action to designate a plot of land in Northeast Texas as the location of the 6th Texas State Veterans Cemetery, contingent upon the donation of the land. The chair recognizes Dr. John Kelly for a presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. I appreciate the time to speak to you today. I am addressing agenda item 5A, consideration possible action to designate a plot of land in Northeast Texas as our 6th location for Texas State Veterans Cemetery. I am the director of the Texas State Veterans Cemetery Division. And so what I'd like to do is present some information for you and then give you the staff recommendation at the end. So first, I'd like to refresh you on the current situation in the state. The red stars that you see depicted there are the locations of the national cemeteries. Out in El Paso, up in Dallas and Houston, the major population centers where you would expect them. There's actually 2 in San Antonio. One of them is only open, it's so small it's only open for cremated remains. And then their star just northwest of San Antonio is Kerrville. That is a national cemetery, but it is in fact closed. Blue stars that you now see on your screen are the operational state veteran cemeteries. And one thing to know is how they're plugging into the geography in between the national cemeteries. And that's actually the purpose of the state veteran cemeteries is to augment the national cemeteries in geography. And then that star that just appeared up in Lubbock is the location of our cemetery we're currently building. I was just there yesterday on an inspection visit. Things are going well up there, and we will open that cemetery on the 12th of December this year. That is the current situation, and you should be looking at that now, starting to see some gaps beginning to pop out at you. Those gaps specifically are up here in East Texas, over in Amarillo, Midland, Odessa, Big Springs area, the sort of mid and upper Rio Grande area. And you'll see it in a minute. There's actually a gap over here at Beaumont as well, but it's not as easily recognized. So that gives us our current situation and starts to paint a picture of where we need to focus in the future. But before we get that, I want to share with you how the NCA, the National Cemetery Administration of the VA, views the situation. And I'm going to pause here and give you a second to read that. There's some numbers in there and some things that are underlined. I tried to do that to draw your attention to those. So the VA's intention is to provide coverage. And when I say coverage, it's that 75-mile service area to 95% of the nation's veterans, either in states or in territories. And we have to remember the territories. We can never discount them because there's a lot of veterans that live in the territories as well. Their trigger at the national level to build a new national cemetery is wherever there are 80,000 or more veterans who are not within the 75-mile service area of a national or a state veterans cemetery. So this number 75 miles is actually critically important to how we look at across the state. And before you ask me where 75 miles came from, I don't know, but it was not from somebody in Texas, because we all know 75 miles is not a great distance in Texas. Our largest unserved veteran population in the state is actually in East Texas, with just over 32,000 unserved veterans. And I'm going to show you a bit more about that as we get through these. And so from that, you can derive, we're not going to have another national cemetery in the state because our biggest population is 32,000, nowhere near approaching that 80,000 trigger. And so in the past, there was some discussion about perhaps a national cemetery coming into Tyler. That's not going to happen because of the trigger point and the fact that we're so far below it. That doesn't mean that we're not going to try to serve our veterans. It simply means we're not going to be able to serve them with a national cemetery. So you're now looking at a chart, and I want to orient you to it first. Two columns. On the left column of each of those columns is a rank number. That rank number references how large the unserved veteran population is across the entire nation. So look up at number 1 on the left side at the very top. Grayling, Michigan actually has the largest unserved veteran population in the nation at just over 50,000. What you can now derive from that, going back a slide or two, remember the trigger for a national cemetery was 80,000. There will not be any more new national cemeteries built anywhere in the country. The only way they're going to be able to achieve 95% coverage is expansion through state veteran cemeteries. The highlighted areas that you see here are the locations in Texas, and this is a list of the top 41 locations across the country. I do want to talk for a moment about rank number 10 because you see 3 different locations on there. And that actually represents a success story. Heretofore in our previous FY22 veteran population, Longview did not appear. What was on there instead was Tyler and New Boston. And I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands if you know where New Boston is, because most people don't. I'm going to show you where that is on a map here in just a minute. But the VA solution was to put a state veteran cemetery in Tyler and another one in New Boston. In my analysis and determination, it made more sense to put one state veteran cemetery in Longview. And I've advocated for that for 2 years now with the National Cemetery Administration. The fact that they put it on the chart means they're actually changing their mind and saying, what a good idea. So you're going to see how that fits on the map here in just a minute. It's going to make a lot more sense to you. And you see down at position 17, Lubbock, building that one right now. That opened in December. You see Amarillo is right behind it. That was that gap up in the Panhandle that we saw. Then you see Midland down in position 20, and that would subsume within that 75-mile radius, Midland, Odessa, and Big Spring. Then we come over to the right-hand column, you see Beaumont at position number 25. Beaumont is more than 75 miles from the Houston National Cemetery. It's actually center to center, it's 92 miles. So it is outside of that 75-mile service area, but a fairly substantial number of veterans there, as you can see. Then down in position 40 and 41 is Laredo and Del Rio. But the veteran population numbers, you see, they're fairly small compared to the other locations. And so this was, again, the NCA's idea was to put a cemetery in Del Rio and another one in Laredo. And so we did some analysis and decided that we would advocate for putting one cemetery in Carrizo Springs that could serve both of those locations. So again, it was about the search for more efficiency, effectiveness, and affordability. All right, so let's look at that on a map now. So the objective is to turn the red counties green. Green counties, they're served by a national cemetery or a VA grant-funded state veteran cemetery. The red ones are not. They're more than 75 miles away. And now the gaps that we talked about a little bit earlier, or I talked about a little earlier in this presentation that you saw in the columnar data, which is on this chart in the lower left corner, that's those locations, right? So we see East Texas, we see the Panhandle around Amarillo, we see the Midland, Odessa area gap, you see the upper mid Rio Grande Valley gap, and then there's the Beaumont gap. Something to notice about this, the NCA does not care about state lines, state borders. They don't care. So when we look right up here, if you can see my cursor, let me see if I can turn on the laser. Maybe that'll help. There it is right there. That little black dot right by my laser is actually a state veteran cemetery in Louisiana, the Northwest Louisiana State Veteran Cemetery. And so look at its service arc of 75 miles. Because that cemetery is right there, we cannot count these 15 counties along the border, even though they're in Texas. They're actually counted against that cemetery in Louisiana. And as I like to say, show me a Texan that wants to be buried in Louisiana, and I'll show you somebody that's not really a Texan. So the point of that is there are about 24,000 veterans in those 13 counties, but we're not allowed to count them against our need. We only get to count the counties in red. So that 32,000 figure that I mentioned, it's on those charts, is the number of veterans within that service area. And that is where, if we locate the cemetery in the Longview vicinity area, that's the 75-mile service arc. So instead of the VA's proposal to put one here in Tyler, and now I'm going to show you, this is New Boston. It is just west of Texarkana. This service arc that you see right here is the service arc if we were to build a cemetery in New Boston. What should jump out at you is almost 3/4 of that service arc is in Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. Now, we all love our veterans in Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. But once a cemetery is built, it is on us at the state to fund the operations of that cemetery. And so for that reason, if we site it in Longview, we actually achieve almost the same coverage as we would do building two cemeteries in Tyler and New Boston. So that's what we're looking, that's the problem that we're going to try to solve. And that's the basis of why you're in the meeting today. I would add anecdotally on your slides, if you can see this, there's a dotted purple line. That's the line of service surrounding Carrizo Springs right here, which would serve both Del Rio and Laredo. Down the road a few years when we get to that point, but I wanted you to understand that we're looking for more effective and efficient ways to provide the service to our veterans and their families. This is a close-in shot now of the locations we're proposing right here. In the middle of that circle is the Longview location. These two yellow squares you see That's the Tyler location that the NCA recommended, and then there's New Boston right there. And you can see more clearly now that almost 3/4 of the service area is not even in Texas. And you now start to understand why we're taking a different approach to it. Do we want to build 2 cemeteries and operate 2 cemeteries, or is it more efficient to build 1 cemetery in a better location to provide the service to our veterans? And so we developed this target zone. If we were to put a state veteran cemetery anywhere in this oval, it would actually reach all the way up to Texarkana. But and we realized that was a key and essential point, because Texarkana is the limit for Texans going northeast. And so we realized if it was inside that oval, it would reach all the way up there and still cover most of our needs within the other target zone. And so for the first time in the cemetery committee's or cemetery's history, a private citizen reached out to us and offered us her own land to donate to the state for the purpose of building a state veteran cemetery. And I asked the question, who does that? Who gives away their land to the state to build a cemetery? Well, we found one. And I think that's a true testament to who this person is. She is currently working through some legal issues associated with title and petitioning. But this Red Star location is specifically where that plot of land is. She has offered us 64 acres of land where that red star is. I'd like to draw your attention to the fact that that red star is 0.2 of a mile south of I-20. So it's right on I-20, just southeast of Hallsville. Hallsville is right in between Longview and Marshall. So when we talk about access in a few minutes, just remember it's right there on I-20. That's a photo that I took last August on that piece of land. And just to update you, if you look in the horizon, you'll see a building and a tower. That's a power plant that's actually been demolished since I took this picture last August. So the horizon is actually empty now. And I sent this picture to the National Cemetery Administration, and I got a 1-word response. The word beautiful. So the National Cemetery Administration said, this is a beautiful piece of land. And I think we can all agree that it is. I'd like to point out it's gently rolling. It's not flat completely. It's got some gentle folds in it. If you look in the empty field, sort of in the middle of the picture, you see a grove of trees, large bushes. That's where the drainage is. So it's draining in that direction. So in a minute, we're going to talk about what the National Cemetery Administration is looking for. What criteria are they looking for in a piece of land? And I want you to think about this picture when we get to that.
I'm sorry. Mr. Rothfelder, you need, for purposes of the Open Meeting Act, you need to make sure the camera is always on your face. Just otherwise they won't count you as present. So if you could just continue to maintain the camera on your face during the meeting. Thank you. Sorry, John.
So I wanted to share with you what are the criteria that the National Cemetery Administration is looking for when we're trying to site a new cemetery. And by extension, we're looking for the same criteria. First and foremost, we have to remember that our Texas law and the Natural Resources Code requires that the land be donated. Heretofore, it's always been a municipal government, a local government, and in one case, the U.S. Army donating land to us. This particular donation will be different because, again, it's a private citizen donating her personal land. And I can't say that often enough because it is such an astounding activity that she's even considering doing this. As you see, we talked about acreage, and I will give you the rule of thumb. For every acre donated for a cemetery, that equals about 1 year of operational capability. So in her case, she looks to donate to us 64 acres. That should allow that cemetery to operate for about 64 years. I've had the question before, and I'll go ahead and answer it now. For scope and scale, 64 acres, how does that relate to our existing cemeteries? Our existing operational cemetery in Corpus Christi is 54 acres. So her donation is already, what she intends to donate is already 10 acres bigger than Corpus Christi's donated land. There we go. We're looking for good drainage. We don't want to build a cemetery in a swamp. Quite frankly, we want it to have good access, as I mentioned before. We want it relatively level. And we want it not to have any environmental historical impacts. We have actually already conducted a phase 1 environmental assessment of this particular piece of property, and it was found to have no major environmental concerns. So it passed. I would tell you, if we were to move forward with this, we will launch a phase 2 environmental study as part of the grant process. So we've already looked at it. We'll look at it in even greater detail in the future, if you accept this recommendation. State must provide legislative authority. We actually have that. We were given that in 2001, and it carries forward. And then we have to provide 10% of the establishment costs. And the reason for that is when we apply for the grant and it just is determined to be funded, that's actually not getting the grant. That's getting a grant opportunity, which for us would launch the engineering design process, followed by the statewide solicitation process to find the construction company that will actually build what we just designed. None of that, all of that occurs before we actually get the grant. But the good news is, and that's what the 10% is for, the good news is that's all reimbursable later on in the process. And so ultimately, 100% of the costs of a state veteran cemetery are reimbursed on the back end. Applications are due the 1st of July each year. The NCA will take all the applications submitted by the 1st of July, they'll rack and stack and prioritize them, and then they'll apply their funding stream. That's why October's on there, the start of the federal fiscal year, and they'll apply their funding stream to it, working from top to bottom, and that's how that process works. So I'm going to give you the staff recommendation, and then I'm going to open it up for any questions that you might have. Staff recommends that the committee approve the 64-acre tract of land near Hallsville, which is where that red star is that I showed you, as the location of the 6th Texas State Veteran Cemetery, but it is contingent upon the completion of the donation of land. What questions do you have?
None for me.
When we submit the grant application, if we go forward in July, has the VA given an idea of the chances that we would get that opportunity approved? And if they don't approve it, do we have an opportunity to reapply?
Yes, ma'am. Great question, and thank you for that. When we submit our grant application, and we have to do it by midnight on the 30th of June to meet the 1 July deadline, they will review it to see if it's conforming with the rules. And I would just tell you, we in Texas enjoy a very good track record with submitting conforming grants. We know what needs to be in there. At that point, when they declare it to be conforming, it goes on to a standing grant priority list. It will stay on there forever until we send a letter requesting that it be withdrawn. There are grants on that list that have been on there for almost 20 years. So it will stay on there. Even if it doesn't get funded, it rolls forward every year. In terms of probabilities, no one at NCA will ever tell you what the probability is that it's going to be funded. They just tell you, oh, it depends on funding. What I would tell you is this: we got the Lubbock Cemetery. We got it because we were ready to launch our grant if we got the opportunity. Other states and territories were not. We got the Lubbock Cemetery because the state of California and Guam were not ready to move forward with grants that were higher priority than us. And so NCA took their money from them and gave it to us because we were ready to launch. My commitment to you and the citizens of the state of Texas is we will always be ready to launch. We will keep our engineers on a short string, committed to that effort. And quite frankly, that's what we pulled off in Lubbock. And a lot of people say they still don't believe we're able to do that, but that's the philosophical approach to this, to make sure that we can execute as quickly as we get that word. Now, I will give you a caveat. Grayling, Michigan, remember that was the one at the top of the list, 50,000 unserved veterans. When those priority group 2 grants are submitted, priority group 2 is the building of a new cemetery called an establishment grant. They're actually prioritized based on that unserved veteran population. When we submit ours, it's actually going to slot in underneath Grayling, Michigan, but ahead of a whole bunch of smaller projects that had smaller numbers of unserved veteran populations. By law, they have to go through all the priority group 1 grants, which are expansion grants, meaning you're running out of plot types. They have to go through all those before they ever get to priority group 2. And then, as I say, we're going to slot in, we're going to be priority 2 of priority group 2. So the likelihood that they reach that far down with money, that money's going to go to Grayling first. And if Grayling for some reason declined, it's actually called a deferral, which they did this year, by the way, then that money would come to us. But it's going to be contingent on, is there enough money to get down to that level? And then is Grayling ready to move forward or not? I know that's a complicated answer. I'm sorry for that, but that has to do with the NCA prioritization mechanism. Yes,
No, I
sir.
appreciate the detail. One last part of the question is, do we have to have the final donation of the land before we submit our application?
Great question. I actually made a call to the NCA recently with exactly that question. And the answer was, we do not have to own the land to submit the application. Now, forward into October, when they're starting to give grant opportunities, we do have to own it then. However, even if we don't own it then, they'll simply defer us for a year. So we'll always stay on that grant list if that were to happen. And that's actually what happened with Grayling, Michigan. They were on the list for fiscal year 2025. They did not own the land at the time the grant was offered to them. And so they simply were deferred for a year. They stayed on there as the highest priority of priority group 2 grants. But that's why now we're going to be slotting underneath them. They have procured the land since then, so they're ready to move forward, but we don't have to own it until we're offered the grant opportunity.
Thank you for
Mr.
that. I have
Scott?
no other questions.
Mr. Scott, I think you.
It's, I have a quick question for you, John. On your priority list, items 10, all 3 of them, collectively add up to over 90,000 veterans. And if we look at the diagram that you have on page 6 of the meeting material, which you have in front of you, you've got Tyler, Longview, and New Boston actually incorporated within the dotted line. Obviously, some of the people in the far reaches of those counties probably don't count, but I'm curious if this were granted, will the number 1, will it satisfy all of 3 of the number 10 list? And the second thing is whether the collective population would actually put us up to the level where we would have a higher priority than the folks in Michigan and or be eligible for a national cemetery.
Yes, sir. So for clarity, and I put the exploded view up here,
Sure.
the yellow box in Tyler, there's an associated 75-mile radius arc around that. So when you see Tyler on that list, that's how many veterans live within that 75-mile service area that are not already served. We don't get to count the green counties. So, and in this, I know it's a busy slide, but it's actually got the veteran populations county by county on those counties. So that yellow box for Tyler, that's where that number comes from, the unserved veterans within that 75 miles. Same thing with New Boston up near Texarkana. You see the yellow box, you see the circle, 3/4 of it's in Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. We can only count the red county population counts within that circle. And then there's a yellow, half yellow and half purple box just east of Longview. That is our proposed location. And that purple circle describes that 75-mile service area. So we're trying to provide service to the veterans in the red counties. And we'll be able to provide it to all those in the red counties inside of that purple circle from a Longview location.
So Dr. Kelly, if I may, Madam Chair. So to answer your question, Mr. Scott, about the National Cemetery, because veterans are considered served, it doesn't fall into that category. So it would not meet that criteria.
All right, but the collective population, if you combine all the unserved veterans and within the purple circle, that puts us obviously higher than 30,000 and presumably puts us up to a total population, which is near or above the number one priority in Michigan, right?
Yes, sir, but I'm not allowed to count the green counties within that purple circle because those are served by that Louisiana cemetery. If I
Right.
could, combined with our red counties in that circle and those green counties, it's 56,000. It's actually more than Grayling, Michigan. But we're
Yeah.
not allowed to count those in the green counties because they're considered served by that cemetery in Louisiana.
Right.
And it's unfortunate, but it goes to the fact that they don't really recognize state boundaries and borders.
No, I understand, but if you then take the net number, because we don't really have well, I guess we do. Longview, Texas has a population of 32,200. Is that essentially what we're talking about in this new configuration of the circles?
No, sir. So the 32,207 figure is,
Yep.
is the count of veterans in each of those counties inside of the purple circle.
Right, that's what I meant.
In red counties. We can't count the green counties.
Right. So that's the net number. And so essentially with this new location, that would be the number we'd be essentially working with, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and
Absolutely. And
then-
let me go back to the chart. So you see there, Longview is at 32,207. If we built one in New Boston, it'd be 31,592. And then Tyler there at 30,000. And
Right.
so what we're trying to do is provide maximum coverage within 75 miles to those
Sure.
unserved red counties. And we want to do it in the most efficient way possible. So we're saying we need one cemetery to provide that. National Cemetery Administration proposed 2 cemeteries to do that.
Sure.
But we think it's more efficient for Texas to go with one cemetery in Longview area.
I think I strongly support this, but I'm just trying to understand the impact on our big picture here. So if we build it, if we get it approved and we build it, then do the other 2, New Boston and Tyler, drop off the
Yes, sir.
priority list?
They do. They'll
Okay.
drop off the list.
All right, that's what I was trying to figure out. Good, that's excellent.
And I think the thing that would make us all feel really good is to watch those red counties up in northeast Texas turn green. On this chart, if you'll notice, we already turned the Lubbock area green because we're almost done building that new cemetery.
Dr. Kelly, let's focus on Northeast Texas here, okay? So
I think Ms. Meyer had a
Yeah.
question.
Ms. Myers, do you have a question?
Just a quick question. What's the time on, once you get notice of the funding, what's the timeline to completion?
Yes, ma'am. Great question. Thank you very much. We can equate it to our timeline with Lubbock, which is the new cemetery we're building now. The design process and the statewide solicitation takes almost a full year to get done. And then construction at Lubbock is a 2-year horizon. So our 2-year construction timeline. So a total of 3 years once we receive the grant opportunity.
Great, thank you.
Are there any further questions or comments? Right then, is there a motion to approve the staff recommendation?
I'll
I'm
move.
happy, and I'm happy to second her motion.
Ms. Myers,
Yes.
second.
Scott. All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? I did not hear any, and the motion is approved.
Good job. We got to use our gavels here. It's very important to us. So,
Next item on the agenda is item number 6. Any closing comments, members?
Actually,
No.
I actually do have a couple. I don't know if anybody else has any, but this, first of all, I congratulate John Kelly and his staff for this work. It's obviously looking ahead, looking at the big picture and coming up with good solutions is excellent for us. But if you go to page 5 of our material, which is the view of Texas with all the circles, there you go. And with the clarification that Mr. Kelly just provided that all of our priority 10 or rank 10 areas would then drop off the list, we end up with essentially 5 other areas that we have a need to provide state-funded cemeteries for. And I think this work is excellent, and I would suggest, and obviously we're not making a motion at this particular point, but I would suggest that this work be embodied into a strategic plan of what we want to do, because reinventing the wheel every time we have to have this discussion is probably not too efficient for us. But secondly, yeah, I think it would put us into a better position with the NCA to be able to say, this is part of our big plan. We know where we're going. We know what we want to do for Texas and our veterans. And it would help us to have an organized approach to it. It may also help to generate other donors who would be willing to donate land for future cemeteries. And obviously we have to have the operating funds to be able to fund the operation. The VA builds it, but we have to fund it. But I think in a state the size of Texas, and with soon the nation's largest population of veterans, will be able to accomplish that. And I think also it provides a concrete example of why Texas does a wonderful job at taking care of the veterans from start to finish. And so I think working on some sort of strategic plan and prioritization would make a lot of sense to capture all the work that's been done. And I don't know, Madam Chair, when, under the sequence of what the cemetery board does or the Veterans Land Board does, exactly how that would work, but I'd like to suggest that, or open it for discussion anyway.
Yes, certainly. I think it's a great idea to.
Well, Mr. Scott, of course, we can't discuss it because it's just closing comments, but your recommendation is noted and
Thank you.
understood.
Thank you.
Additional comments from any members?
No.
Thank you for all the hard work.
Yes, thank you.
Well, that concludes the posted agenda. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So move, second the motion.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? We're adjourned.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you. Be
everybody.
safe. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everybody.
Have a
Goodbye
great
now.
weekend.